Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth and fancy seeing you here in June. A very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. And welcome to episode 10 of Smallville, the saviour of Superman. And I'm really enjoying doing this series of videos about one of my favourite shows of all time. As I have always labelled it, the greatest show on earth, definitely one of the greatest shows on earth. Smallville came from the golden generation of TV that launched from 2001 with Smallville, Alias, 24, Lost, Prison Break, so many great shows. And I think the level of storytelling has gone down. Yes, we've got TV shows now with great budgets, movie actors, but I think the quality of storytelling, there's a few out there that are really good, but I do believe from 2001 to about 2011, we had the golden generation of TV. And in terms of the content, I don't think it's the same anymore. Today, we're going to talk about a very, very difficult subject for every single true Smallville fan, and that's Allison Mack. I feel, look, it's a really difficult subject, but I need to broach it. I loved Allison Mack in Smallville. She was one of the actors. I mean, the casting for Smallville by Alan Miles was one of the best piecing of castings on a TV show I've ever seen. And Allison stood out from the pilot. Now, when someone in the entertainment industry, in the public eye, does something in terms of the level that Allison did, it's very easy to start accusing them, you've abused your position, you've let me down, you were my hero. That's not her lookout. If I looked up to Allison, and especially Chloe, I looked up to Allison for being a great artist, and I looked up to Chloe for being a great role model. And Chloe is still a great role model. What Allison did in her real life doesn't change how I feel about Chloe. But sometimes when I'm rewatching the show, I kind of remember what she's accused of doing. But I always believe in Chloe. I mean, there's elements of Chloe's story I don't like. I don't really like how they ended Chloe's story in the finale. But we can talk about this throughout this video. But what happened with Nixon and her connection is one of the most devastating things I've ever heard. And of course I was heartbroken, but again, how we felt about what she did in her personal life, that's not her responsibility. It's not a human being's, it's not their responsibility to be perfect. And it's difficult. They should be allowed to get on with their personal lives. And Allison led a very private personal life, and that's up to her, and that's right and proper. But what she was accused of doing here is using who she was to lure people into Nixon. Now, I think that's what it's called anyway. I probably got it wrong. But I think she did get into some kind of relationship with the person who was running it. I don't know. I know that originally she joined this organisation with Kristen Krug, who played Lorna. I'll definitely be doing a whole video about Lorna and Kristen. Got a lot of time for Kristen as well, by the way. Everyone who was in Smallville was great, right? Now, according to Kristen, she said, I knew nothing about this. I just went there to get my confidence up because this is what they were supposed to do. But of course, we know they were using them as sex slaves, I think, and I don't really know. And a lot of it is alleged. I've got to say alleged because even though Allison has literally admitted what she's done now, it's all legal. And I've got to be careful. I don't want to risk the YouTube channel because I've been working at it for a year. It's not especially successful, but I'm enjoying doing the videos. And for the 9-10 people who watch them or whoever watches them, I'm very proud that you do sit here and listen to what I've got to say and form your own opinions, of course. So what happened to Allison is one of the is the big Hollywood tragedies for me, because nobody expected it. We didn't know much about her. I think everyone was surprised, and it was really disappointing because the sad thing is here, Allison, so talented, and you could see that this young woman could have done anything. And when Smallville finished, I think she guest starred in a show with the guy who plays Frodo. I forgot his name. Great actor, obviously. I forgot his name. Anyway, she did a little kind of comedy with him as well, and that went across really well. She didn't do too much, to be honest with you, which surprises me because Allison should have been winning Oscars, Emmys. She was that good. On Smallville, she was amazing. So if we move away from Allison's real life and I'm really sorry for her, what's happened, even though she did it to herself and she did something really, really bad. Kind of, for me, I hope she was influenced by a really bad person. And I hope, and I don't know what's going to happen to her. She could spend the rest of her life in jail. We don't know. Hopefully she gets a chance to rebuild her life and make up for what she's done, because it's just a shame. But as Chloe Sullivan, she was amazing from day one. Her performances were so real, so raw, so convincing. She became Chloe from the very pilot. She was amazing. The enthusiasm of the character to go to school and to work at the Torch. The Torch was a great idea by Al Miles, by the way, to have these kids. And as Pete called them, he was like, "Oh, she's just doing these Scooby-Doo adventures. She obviously was the one who had the theories about the meteors," which is right. So every episode in season 1, they are investigating these meteors, and these meteor freaks were infected by, well, we know it's kryptonite, but they don't. Not even Clark knows it's called kryptonite till season 2. I thought that was a great premise. Alan Miles come up with this X-Files kind of concept, story of a week, where these kids are kind of being Mulder and Scully, if you want, Clark Kent, who, is an iconic character, investigating kryptonite-infected people. It was a great idea. Some people didn't like the Freak of the Week. I thought it was a great concept, and it worked for the first season. And sometimes they brought it back for other seasons, but mostly it was about the first season. I think it worked. I think it was genius. But anyway, Chloe being the editor of this high school paper was a really clever idea. Now, what's interesting about Chloe is she's not from the comics. I know they forced her in there in the end, but basically Chloe isn't an OG character. She isn't from the comics. They created her. Basically, I'll tell you the backstory, or this is what I believe. I don't know if it's true or not, but I think Alan Miles wanted Lois Lane from the pilot, and DC said no. So they weren't going to back off. They decided to create their own version of Lois Lane, but just call her someone else. And ultimately, how ironic, and I don't know when they come up with the idea, that Chloe and Lois are actually cousins, right? And this is just in the show, right? And so they couldn't have Lois originally, so they brought in a Lois substitute. That's what Chloe is, because Chloe is everything as much of Lois than Lois is. I mean, Erica is a great Lois, and she absolutely kind of demonstrates that she's Lois, and it works. And I think they had a problem when Lois came, because they had to kind of change what Chloe was doing and what Chloe was. That was very, very, very important. Otherwise, they would be the same character. And I think they did have problems, and I think that's why they took Chloe out of the Daily Planet eventually. Otherwise, it would have become very, very problematic. But like for the first 3 seasons, Chloe was really our Lois Lane, and Allison demonstrated it. And I'm sure they told her to kind of show Lois' sensibilities. So it's amazing, really, if you think about it, because they couldn't have Lois Lane, but they created the character just like Lois Lane, and it really worked. And she was also very, very similar to Andrea Zuckerman from 90210. She had that passion, and the relationship with her and Clark was very, very similar to the relationship between Brandon and Zuckerman as well. And I liked that. I liked that. So she was really good. And what I liked about what Al Miles did with her, ultimately they gave her more and more responsibility. So in season 1 she was there, but she wasn't as prominent as she would be in later seasons, and they did things to make her more relevant and more important within the show, because she just became very popular with teenage audiences. And I mean, with me, I loved her, and I was about 28 when Smallville was first on the air. I'm 46 now, by the way, getting up. And even though she was a kid at school, you didn't see her that way. The thing is with the teens in Smallville, because they were played by more older people, they wrote them with an older mentality. So these kids would go to school. They weren't saying, we hate you, Mum and Dad. They were going to school. They didn't particularly love school, but I think going to school together, working in the Torch, kind of inspired them to go to school. And I think that was a great message for young people at that time as well. They were doing something really practical, because most kids think school's a waste of time. I think school's a waste of time. I think the education system's a load of shit. But they were going there, and they were trying to help make the town they live in a safer place. And Clark's going up against these meteor freaks, of course. And with the meteor freaks, Alan Miles created these type of mutants, I suppose. And it really worked for the first season of the show, So, as I say, Alison just really kept on giving this character more and more. And so did Alan Miles, Kelly and Brian, and the rest of the writers. The most pivotal thing about Chloe's character for me was the dynamic in the relationship she had with Clark Kent and the chemistry she had with Tom Welling. And the deeper we got into their friendship and relationship, because they did try and do this thing where there was a romance in season one, I think they did it to get rid of it. And I think anything to delay Clark and Lorna getting together as well. So the first season, Lorna is with Whitney, of course, and Chloe and Clark start to date. Of course, it doesn't work, but it's very interesting. It's very interesting, and I just think after season one, just Chloe, they sent Chloe in different directions. And in season 3, they gave her a lot more responsibility, and they started tying her in with Lionel Luthor. And I think once you've got a young actor like Alison, and you're telling her, there's this monumental theatrical actor in John Glover, and we want you to go toe to toe with his character. And I remember the scene when Chloe's pretending she's not intimidated by him. Then she leaves the office and she's like, you could tell she was shitting herself all the time. Again, that's what Alison did. Alison's just very, very, very talented. And that's what I mean. What a shame. What a shame we've lost that from the industry. I just don't know what's going to happen to it. It's just, look, for me, it's a very sad and tragic story. And I think it's a story that we're never going to forget about because Alison was so good in Smallville. Now, in terms of her ending, because I did mention it and I did mention I'll speak about it, Alison, what happened with the final 3 seasons of Smallville, the animals kind of took over the zoo. The main actors like Tom and Alison they were allowed to have an opinion and have it heard about the show and where it was going to go. And obviously the finale, they had opinions after 10 years how their characters would end. Because what happened when season 7 finished and Alan Miles left, Michael, John, Kristin, they were desperate to keep Alison. And I think Alison and Tom had a lot of bargaining power then. So she really, really wanted to make sure that where the character was going is where she thought the character should go. So she had this thing, because everyone always thought that Chloe was going to die. I didn't always think that. I thought that because Alan Miles had this arc about her mental health and what happened to her mother, I thought the best ending for her would to end up in an asylum or something, or maybe pretend to be in an asylum so no one can connect the dots that she knew Clark and no one can find out any information. Or just that she has a total mental breakdown in the end and she ends up in an asylum. Now, I thought that would have been the best ending. Now, it would have been a bittersweet ending. It wouldn't have been the ending some of the Skin Deep Brigade who were watching Smallville at that time. This young female audience that Osloff wanted, who was running the CW at the time. But Alison decided that Chloe should have this happy ending. I hated her and Oliver being together. The day I heard that was happening, that was the first time I despised something they were doing on Smallville. Normally, I embraced everything these people did because it was just an amazing show. It just kept on surprising you and compelling you every week for a decade. But that was ridiculous because they killed off Jimmy, right? And then they kind of put her with Oliver, right? And that disappointed me in a lot of ways because there's so many more interesting things they could have done with Oliver. Anyway, I didn't like that romance. And so Alison was obsessed with Chloe not dying in the series finale, which I was fine with. But as I say, because they did the whole thing with the mental health thing, they never finished that arc off because, of course, Al Miles had left. So Kelly and Brian didn't want to touch that. But that would have been the perfect way to finish her character, right? At the end of the day, bittersweet, tragic story. And I think, in earnest, that's what Chloe is. She's a hero. She's a hero who sacrifices herself. Because we know, the character said it many times, I would do anything, sacrifice anything for Clark. The way she protected him was just emotional, so emotional sometimes, I just wanted to cry. And I just think her in an asylum, finishing off what Alan Miles started with the touches of mental health, would have been perfect for the character. But Alison didn't want that. The CW didn't have that. So what did they have her do? What was her last scene? Her penultimate to last scene was she's walking out the Kent farm. She looks up to the impending planet apocalypse coming to Earth, crashing down on Earth. She smiles and she walks off. I thought it was an absolutely ridiculous way to end her character. That's not how you do it. That wasn't a happy ending. It was a forced and contrived ending. And as I say, it wasn't the ending I wanted for Chloe. And really, I think that's one of many problems with the series finale. Anyway, what do you think of Alison Mack and what's happened to her in real life? What did you think of Chloe? Was she one of your favourite characters? Please comment, like, share and subscribe. And I'll be back tomorrow for episode 11 of Smallville, The Saviour of Superman.